are irresistible for pleasure seekers. Swimmers, boating enthusiasts, and fishermen spend much of their time suspended at the surface. But lurking deep inside some of these lakes is a mystery, one that can turn a serene scene into an alarming afternoon. Are these lake monsters fact or fiction?
I saw what I saw.
There's no doubt at all that these creatures exist.
Photos remind us of something eyewitnesses can't forget.
All I know is that there's something large and alive that's out there in these waters.
Scientists search the dark recesses of our deepest lakes for the two greatest lake monsters of all time.
Still not sure what that is, really. Right.
And a new breed of monster hunter pours everything he has into this mystery.
We've got this mystery at Loch Ness. We've got people seeing things at Loch Ness. Something has to be the explanation.
Travel along as we scour the world's most famous lakes in search of two notorious lake monsters. Next on Weird Travels. Loch Ness is one of a series of interconnected murky lakes in the Scottish Highlands carved by glaciers during the Ice Ages. 23 miles long and over a mile wide, Loch Ness contains more fresh water than all the lakes in England and Wales combined. From Inverness in the north to Fort Augustus in the south, it's a quaint area dotted with pubs, bagpipers, and a fiddler or two. But as locals and travelers frolic on the shores of the loch, a large, mysterious creature could be lurking just beneath the surface. Could this be the den of the legendary Loch Ness monster?
There's no mystery like this mystery in Great Britain. There's very few mysteries as interesting as this one in the world.
No other lake mystery has been studied more than that of Loch Ness and its resident creature, Nessie. Its environment, diet, and classification in the animal world have been argued about for centuries.
I think there might be something down there. I think it's possible.
If I saw something, I'd scream and run away.
Have present-day scientists uncovered new clues that unlock the mystery? Do creatures like Nessie actually exist?
When you come to Loch Ness, you know that you are in the presence of something that nobody has yet been able to answer. And when you actually think about it, we can put a man in the moon, but we've got a simple little Scottish loch out there that's 800 feet deep, and we just don't know what's down at the bottom of that.
The legend of a monster inhabiting Loch Ness began almost 1,500 years ago. Legend has it that an Irish missionary named St. Columba was crisscrossing Scotland in 565 AD when tragedy struck. A huge creature attacked one of his followers.
The monster rears up, comes in with a dreadful roar. St. Columba makes the sign of the cross in the empty air, as the account goes, and the monster turns back more quickly than it had been drawn by cords. And this is the first excuse we have of claiming a pedigree for our Loch Ness monster.
Then in 1868, a strange discovery added weight to the myth that an unknown creature might be living in the loch.
A strange fish, a monster fish in fact, is found stranded at Abreacon, which is one of the places on the northern end of Loch Ness. So by 1868, there is at least a clear tradition of a strange fish in Loch Ness.
In 1933, a couple on holiday from London would set off a new wave of monster sightings in the area.
Spicers, who I believe he was a fur buyer from London, and his wife came up the road. The Spicers saw something cross the road, which they believed had come from the water. and they imagined that this was the Loch Ness Monster they had seen.
And that was the first time that a long neck was reported on a Loch Ness Monster. We may speculate as to what caused that sighting, whether it was mirage or whether it was deer or whatever. But after that sighting, people began to see long-necked prehistoric monsters in Loch Ness.
Scientists and sightseers cooked up plenty of theories about Nessie.
People started saying, is this a giant eel? Is it a giant, dinosaur like a plesiosaurus? Is it a giant seal that hasn't been discovered? Is it some kind of gigantic creature that may be related to fish?
Then, in 1934, the scientific world would be turned on its ear when a Londoner boasted about snapping the first ever picture of the beast. Was this the proof the world was waiting for?
And the picture confirms everything that some of the witnesses have been saying. It led to the prehistoric monster, the plesiosaur idea, the stereotype of the Loch Ness Monster.
The picture put Loch Ness firmly on the map. For almost 60 years, this photo fueled the belief that a dinosaur-like creature lived in the loch. But in 1994, experts determined the photo was a fake.
It is artistically brilliant, and it's a complete hoax.
Despite disappointment over the hoaxed photo, people wanted to believe that a lake monster existed. Loch Ness quickly became a mecca for sightseers and scientists who focused their attention on the long and narrow 23-mile body of water.
It's funny, isn't it? It's so steep here, this fault line trench. I mean, we're already in a depth of twice the height of the castle tower. We're only 100 It has a trench-like profile, very steep walls and a flat bed. And that results, in its turn, in an immense volume of water. And so in terms of space, then yes, it could contain a few mysteries.
To get to the bottom of these mysteries, the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau was formed, and people came from near and far to volunteer for the first organized search for a lake monster.
I first came here in '67 as a volunteer. I believed there was something down there, so that was it as far as I was concerned. It was just a matter of finding it.
Coming up, a British Member of Parliament takes on the Loch Ness Monster.
He enlisted the British Ministry of Defence. He was completely ruthless.
And later, investigators detect some strange activity deep in the loch.
Still not sure what that is, really, are we? So...
Next on Weird Travels. The Scottish Highlands are shrouded in mystery. But what is it about this area that sends chills up your spine? Maybe it's the spirits inhabiting the ancient town cemetery. Maybe it's the dungeons in the ruins of Urquhart Castle. But more than likely, it's the dozens of visions of a huge lake monster suddenly emerging from the depths of the loch and disappearing just as quickly beneath its peat-stained surface.
I would say Loch Ness is mysterious, and it makes you realise just what we have on our doorsteps.
Ella MacRae knows a thing or two about the area's resident monster. She says she's seen Nessie 3 times. The most startling sighting took place when she was just 10 years old.
We saw something in the loch, which we thought was an overturned boat. So we stopped what we were doing, came straight back down to the village and got the local postman to go out on the loch to go and help him. And it turned out it wasn't a fisherman, there was nothing there, but what we had seen had disappeared completely.
Not surprisingly, grown-ups didn't buy the story.
When we told our parents what we'd seen, they thought it was just our imagination, children, seeing things.
But Ella is convinced that her eyes didn't deceive her.
Nobody's explained it to me. So to me, yes, there is something strange in the loch. And you know, it's not something you see every day. It's something that you can look back on and say, well, did I see a monster?
Hundreds of people have recounted stories similar to hers. On June 15, 1965, police officer Ian Cameron reportedly had a close encounter with Nessie while fishing with a friend. 40 years later, his son recalls the haunting story.
Out of the corner of my father's eye, he saw an object floating on the surface of the water. But then a most interesting thing happened, that it turned completely and started going against the headwinds.
The policeman realized that it wasn't some wood or debris floating on the surface. It had to be something alive.
The unfortunate thing is that nobody had a camera to actually photograph this object. They actually watched it for 50 minutes, nearly 1 hour. And in the annals of the phenomena that's known as the Loch Ness story, it's probably regarded as the longest sighting in record.
The sightings continued, but there was still no physical proof that a monster did in fact lurk in the loch. It was time to turn to science and technology for some answers.
I don't know whether I was expecting the Loch Ness Monster to be an unknown animal new to science, or whether I was expecting something left over from the age of dinosaurs. I didn't really have any feeling on that. There were so many theories going around at the time.
Dick Raynor is one of many Highland locals who has long been obsessed with Nessie. In 1967, he volunteered as a camera operator for the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau, an organization established by a member of Parliament named David James to analyze photographs of Nessie and try to capture more of the monster on film.
David James devoted quite a lot of energy towards collecting equipment, volunteers. He even enlisted the British Ministry of Defence in analysing photographs from Loch Ness. He was completely ruthless in trying to engage the government agencies in what was then an extremely controversial subject.
This is a photograph taken by Hugh Gray in 1933 that is generally accepted as the first picture of what we would call the Loch Ness Monster.
Many people during this time submitted photographs of unknown creatures, but the pictures revealed more questions than answers.
When I first came here, I was a simple believer. People showed me a photograph, I believed, I took it at face value, I took it at value for what they said it had. Over the years, you look at photographs over and over again and you see new things in them.
Members of the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau pored over each photograph, hoping to identify the mysterious creature captured on film. And throughout the summer months, dozens of volunteer cameramen maintained a constant lookout from the shores of the loch.
They were attempting to repeat, on good quality film, through good quality telescopic lenses, the classic photographs that had appeared fortuitously over the years.
But this type of investigation produced fewer photos of the beast than had been reported in any previous 10-year period. It seemed Nessie was more than just a little camera shy. Despite the Investigation Bureau's best efforts, they were unable to acquire any more photographic proof of a lake monster.
The cameras around Loch Ness were all taken down.
But with so many eyewitness accounts, there had to be a better way to prove the creature's existence. Investigators were not about to give up. It was just time for a different approach. The Bureau decided to move the investigation from the shores of the loch to the depths of its dark waters. To search the lake, they turned to homemade submarines and experimental underwater photographic equipment. But spotting an elusive creature in the deep, dark, and murky waters also posed a challenge.
Loch Ness is very, very deep. You know, it's deeper than the ocean that's out beside it. The ocean out there is 400 feet deep. Loch Ness at its deepest point is 810 feet down.
There's more water in Loch Ness than in all the lakes and reservoirs in England and Wales added together.
The search continued, but the Bureau's limited resources couldn't compete with the enormous task at hand.
People were giving serious consideration to the problem, but the problem had turned out to be one, if you like, of the hostility of the environment.
In 1971, the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau disbanded. But many of the original members refused to give up their search for a creature in Loch Ness.
There's always the possibility of finding something unknown. That's what this is all about.
Up. Will Nessie finally be caught on camera? And later, reports of a lake monster across the Atlantic shake up New England.
My husband came back on the top of the bank and he's screaming, "Get out of the water!"
Forests of larch and spruce dot the steep slopes alongside Loch Ness in the Scottish Highlands. But it's the legend of a Loch Ness monster that attracts thousands of visitors every year. During the summer months, the sun shines from 3 a.m. until 11 p.m. Plenty of time to hunt for a lake monster. That's what Dick Raynor intends to do today. An amateur photographer, he's engineered an underwater camera that he hopes will help him track down the elusive creature known as Nessie. It's his first outing with his new camera.
Right, this is the latest experiment. It's a very simple underwater camera. In this plastic tube is a strip of infrared diodes. I'm using infrared because I think the fish cannot see it. So with a bit of luck, I might be able to see the fish without them seeing me.
As Dick ventures far from shore, his camera begins to capture ghost-like images of the lake bottom.
Quite exciting, if a little nerve-wracking sometimes.
Below, it's eerily quiet. Dick's camera penetrates the darkness of the loch, but reveals nothing save for a few eels. Dick continues his search, but as the sun begins to set, it seems clear that the monster he has been searching for has eluded him once again. But he'll be back.
There's always the possibility of finding something unknown. That's what this is all about.
Adrian Shine also intends to find out what's behind the monster sightings. But he's using high-tech sonar equipment to comb the depths of the loch.
We'll keep plugging across under the shelter of the castle. Yeah. It's a good place to start a profile.
As he approaches his destination, a strange signal appears on his sonar.
Still not sure what that is, really. Just check it out before you...
The signal disappears. And then another disturbance.
It wouldn't be at all so obvious how big it was. That's one of the diving birds. They can be Loch Ness monsters.
No luck this time. As it turns out, even sonar isn't foolproof. In fact, some suggest that the sound waves might even scare the monster away. And as precise as it is, it still can't reveal all the hidden recesses of the lake.
You have some of these expeditions that say they're going up and down Loch Ness with sonar, and they can't get every nook and cranny. There's caves in the walls, so sonar is not foolproof.
Until technology catches up with the elusive creature, it's the Eyewitness who will keep the legend alive.
The Eyewitness reports have continued. In fact, the human case for the Loch Ness Monster was actually overwhelming.
Well, despite all the so-called scientific research over the years in Loch Ness, I know what I saw in Loch Ness, and there's no doubt at all that these creatures exist.
And the similarities between the sightings are astounding. George Edwards says he saw a monster in 1986.
I was on my rowing boat. I had my son out in the boat. It was his 8th birthday. We just happened to look across the loch, and lo and behold, I saw this object in the water.
Camera in hand, George took a shot of the large beast.
As you can see, it's just a single black hump in the water. I estimate 6 to 8 feet long, no more than 2 or 3 feet out of the water.
He insists he used no photographic trickery. More importantly, George says he can prove exactly where the photo was originally taken.
Now, what's quite important in my opinion about the photograph is it actually shows a landmark in Loch Ness.
The background of George's photo closely resembles a nearby hillside, right down to a large bald patch on the land.
At the end of the day, it's all down to eyewitness reports.
Why would solid citizens subject themselves to ridicule unless they firmly believed in what they had seen?
If it was a court of law, the number of witnesses that have seen something would categorically show that there is a Loch Ness monster. Not too far over, but just about quarter of a way out the loch, just out here, and moving in that direction. It was moving up the loch.
Gary Campbell is an accountant who claims he saw Nessie in 1996 when he stopped beside the loch to kill time between client visits.
I was doing paperwork and it's just dead boring, really, you know, day-to-day mundane stuff. And I sort of caught this thing out of the corner of my eye. But then, all of a sudden, this thing came back out again. And it was, I suppose, like a mini whale would be the best way to describe, maybe 12, 14 feet long.
What he saw on the loch still haunts him to this day.
I definitely saw something. It was definitely something alive. And the curiosity took me over and said, no, I don't care what people say. I'm going to find out what it was that I saw that day in Loch Ness.
Coming up, are these sightings the only ones of their kind? Or does another lake monster live right in our own backyard?
It was definitely exciting because it was so real. There was too many people watching it to not be real.
I saw what I saw. It was something that shouldn't have been there, but was and is.
And then, monster or myth, scientists give their take on what's really in the lake. 3,000 miles west from Scotland, across the Atlantic Ocean, lies another spot shrouded in mystery, Lake Champlain. Nestled between Canada, New York, and Vermont, in the northern part of New England, Lake Champlain is almost 5 times as long and 12 times as wide as Loch Ness. The Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department stocks Lake Champlain with hundreds of thousands of fish each spring. But is there an unexpected creature in these waters as well?
It always intrigues me that people go all the way across the ocean to go look at Nessie, when in fact the most prominent lake monster, I think, in the world is Champ in Lake Champlain.
Burlington, Vermont is a charming New England city that's pure Americana. Home to the University of Vermont and boasting its own minor league baseball team. At first glance, this town seems worlds away from the Scottish Highlands. Instead of quaint local pubs, there's the bustling Church Street Market. And instead of the 250 days of rainfall a year at the Scottish Highlands, Lake Champlain's weather is far less predictable. But the closer you get to the waterfront of Lake Champlain, the more the differences between Vermont and Scotland seem to disappear. Is Lake Champlain also home to a long-necked monster? According to local legend, the first sighting of a Lake Champlain monster took place 400 years ago, when Samuel de Champlain first explored the territory that is now Vermont.
In 1609, when he was looking at the lake that would get his name later, he saw this creature, which many have said is the first sighting of the Lake Champlain monster. It was very long, it had ridges on it, it was going swiftly through the water, and the native peoples gave it a name which he interpreted as monster, and has come down through history.
For a long time, Champ was considered to be little more than a fictitious creature that was woven into local legend and family fables.
my dad would take us out fishing. And he would say to us, if you don't sit down and be quiet, I'm going to throw you overboard and Champ is going to eat you.
For years, the legend of the Lake Champlain monster wavered between fact and fiction. But in 1977, intriguing new evidence emerged. Possible proof that Champ was more than just a figment of local lore. Sandra Mansi, her husband Tony, and their 2 children stopped to relax by the shoreline while driving along the lake on a warm day in July.
And it was picture perfect. I mean, the sky had few clouds in it and blue. It was wonderful.
I'm gonna go get the camera. Okay.
And my husband said, I'm going back to the car to get the camera.
Suddenly, something strange on the surface of the water caught Sandra's attention.
And I'm looking way off into the distance, and then I could see the ripples coming in the water, and I thought, boy, that must be a really big fish. And I'm watching, and I'm just enjoying the fact, wow, what a great fish. And then the head came out of the water, and the neck came out. At this point, the back isn't even out of the water. And my husband came back on the top of the bank and he's screaming, get out of the water, get out of the water.
The placid scene on the lake turned to pandemonium.
I knew what it was. I absolutely knew that this was Champ.
Sandra watched, transfixed.
It was total awe. I was in total awe.
This was unlike anything she had ever seen before.
It looked like a dinosaur, huge. And I thought it was like maybe 6 to 8 feet out of the water, maybe 10 feet long, 8 feet long.
Sandra had the presence of mind to snap a picture before the creature vanished.
And I could see it go down. It went down like this, and then it dove in, and off it went.
Had Sandra's family come face to face with the creature in her father's fishing stories?
We were like, what do we do? Do we stop and tell someone? Who are you going to tell? And what are you going to tell them? Oh, we just saw a dinosaur in the lake? I don't think so.
Even when the picture was developed and they had proof of their sighting, the Mansis kept silent for fear of being ridiculed.
We just put it away. We hid it in a photo album.
4 years later, Sandra showed the photo to a friend, and word spread quickly through this small town. Soon, a tabloid offered the family big money to publish the photo, but the Mansis turned it down.
We chose to go with the New York Times, who didn't pay, but we had credibility as opposed to money.
Experts examined the picture and determined it wasn't a fake. Today, it's considered the gold standard of proof for the existence of lake monsters.
I think the Mansi photograph taken by Sandra Mansi is one of the best pieces of evidence for the lake monsters around the world. Sandra Mansi is a credible witness that did not want any monetary gain from it. And you'll see the photo analysis, and there's something remarkable in that lake.
And if Sandra Mansi's photograph wasn't evidence enough, 70 more people were about to catch sight of the elusive lake monster. One night in 1984, on a boat named the Spirit of Ethan Allen, a 50th anniversary party was in full swing when an unexpected guest made a surprise appearance.
I looked out the window and saw what I would describe as maybe 3 or 4 humps. And we walked up the stairs, all of the guests, there were 70 guests, were watching it also. It was creating its own wake, meaning it was going forward in the water.
The ship's captain and guests watched the creature for almost 5 full minutes. It was the largest mass Champ sighting in history.
It was definitely exciting because it was so real. There was too many people watching it to not be real. The creature, whatever it was, turned left and dove, and its wake disappeared. It then came back about 5 minutes later, and that's the last time we ever saw him. Nobody was afraid. Everybody was calm. It was more bewilderment and amazement is what we were looking at than any type of fear.
The photographer for the party snapped some pictures, but the photo lab ruined the film. The 70 partygoers weren't out to prove Champ's existence. They were certain of what they saw in Lake Champlain that evening.
I think everybody left the boat with a newfound understanding of what Champ was all about.
We don't know everything. There are still treasures and secrets left in this world for us to find.
2 lake monsters living on either side of the Atlantic, dozens of sightings at each location, and similar descriptions of both creatures beg the question: could these lake monsters be related?
I really think the comparison between Loch Ness and Champ, there's a lot that really needs to be looked at.
Coming up, are Loch Ness and Lake Champlain home to the same mysterious creature? And later, a modern-day monster hunter stakes out the shores of Loch Ness. Next on Weird Travels. From the watering holes of Burlington, Vermont, to the pubs of Inverness, Scotland, stories of monsters lurking in the nearby lakes continue to fuel the imagination of travelers and townspeople alike.
All I know is that there's something large and alive that's out there in these waters, and I'd really like to find out what it is, but I don't know whether I'd actually walk out or go in these waters to find out.
When you realize how much Loch Ness has in common with Lake Champlain, the idea of a lake monster existing in both bodies of water isn't too far-fetched.
There are a lot of similarities between Loch Ness and Lake Champlain. Loch Ness, of course, is a very narrow lake that's extremely long. It can be as deep as 800 to 1,000 feet. If you look at Lake Champlain, it's also extremely long and thin, extremely deep, some places supposedly 600 feet deep.
A comparison of the 2 lakes reveals a number of other similarities. Both are deep freshwater lakes in seasonally cold climates within 10 degrees of latitude from one another. Could lake monster theories be applied to creatures in both bodies of water? And are lake monsters actually hiding there? Or is there a much simpler explanation to Nessie and Champ's mysterious identities?
When I first came here in '67, I was pretty sure that we were looking for plesiosaurs in the lake. These are supposed to have died out 65 million years ago.
Plesiosaurs are large, carnivorous aquatic reptiles, a relic from the days when the dinosaurs roamed the planet. Could some of them have survived? And are they lurking deep within the largest lakes all around the world?
Those people that believe that the Loch Ness Monster or Champ are plesiosauruses have this theory that the lakes were there during the Ice Age, and some of these marine sea monsters or sea serpents got into these lochs and lakes, and that they were captured there.
A plesiosaur has the nice attributes of Champ. It has that long neck, it has the head that sticks out, it has an articulated neck, it has a back that sticks out way beyond, it's huge, it's got flippers, it lives in lakes. So it's certainly a very popular Champ possibility, if you will.
But a prehistoric animal would have a tough time surviving in these lakes because there simply isn't enough food there to sustain this type of creature for millions of years. But these large freshwater lakes are the perfect environment for another prehistoric descendant, the sturgeon. Sturgeons are living fossils of fish evolution. They date back to the Triassic period about 200 million years ago, and lakes like these are breeding grounds for them.
They have a life history like the salmon. They enter fresh water to spawn, but they're huge.
The sturgeon in Lake Champlain get to be about 6 to 8 feet when they're adults. And you can probably imagine a school of sturgeon, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these really large animals coming to the surface of the water might look a little bit like Champ, especially if you're in a boat or on the shore hundreds of yards away.
They're bizarre looking. If somebody were to come across a large sturgeon, especially if it rolled at the surface unexpectedly, it would look very inexplicable. It would look like a monster.
In the past few decades, once fabled animals like the giant squid were finally photographed and identified as real live animals. Could there be an entirely new species of creature lurking deep beneath the surface of these waters, just waiting to be discovered?
It's a passport to another world down there. And there's always the possibility of finding something unknown.
I think the sea, particularly, still holds species that we've not recorded yet in science.
Until some proof surfaces, the mystery endures.
All of those kinds of theory may have some validity, but we don't know, and we won't know until we have part of a body or a DNA sample.
I'm sure the loch has some more surprises for us yet.
While the lake monster's identity remains unclear, weather may be a factor in some of the thousands of reported sightings. In fact, Vermont's wintry storms could be to blame for cases of mistaken identity. When the snow melts and broken trees and branches are washed into the lake each spring, fallen limbs often take on a different appearance.
On a misty morning or at dusk when the visibility isn't so good and you suddenly see something rearing itself out of the water and it's got a hump behind it and you realize it's a log with a branch. But if you don't have that opportunity to get a bit closer or check the sighting or think for a moment perhaps before you have that clutch of fear, oh my God, I'm seeing a monster, they look very realistic.
Waves and currents can also play tricks on travelers and locals eager to spot the elusive lake monsters.
One thing I'd like to show you is how boat wakes can sometimes look like humps in the water. See over there, that's quite impressive. That's a row of humps going along the lake. It's the sort of thing that quite often gets reported here.
But natural disturbances account for only a small portion of these monster sightings. Whatever the explanation, over the years, 300 people have witnessed a creature of some sort in Lake Champlain alone.
I think it's incredibly appealing to have a mystery, something that science cannot explain. It's appealing to me to have something that science cannot explain.
Just as Lake Champlain locals have embraced the creature, so has the government.
Vermont and New York have passed resolutions that it is illegal to harm, harass, or do harm in any way to Champ, just in case Champ really does exist.
The absence of indisputable proof does not dissuade people from believing that these creatures exist. On either side of the Atlantic, scientists and eyewitnesses agree something is down there. These investigations are just the tip of the iceberg. Much work still needs to be done to get to the bottom of the lake monster mystery.
I think that what has happened is we have had many sightings. We have not really had the resources to really go in and look. As far as a carcass and bones and so forth, it's a very deep lake. I think that someday they're going to find proof.
Now, when you consider the size of Loch Ness, the depth of Loch Ness, the dark impenetrable water, the fact that every year in the open seas we are finding over 5,000 new types of marine life, then the existence of some entirely new species in Loch Ness, which has never really been investigated below the surface due to lack of technology, becomes more than just a possibility.
Up next, a new breed of monster hunter keeps this mystery alive.
We've got people seeing things at Loch Ness. Something has to be the explanation.
The legendary lake monsters have received global attention over the years. After all, people love a good mystery, and plenty of travelers will go out of their way to take a piece of it home. On the western shore of Lake Champlain, Port Henry, New York holds its annual Champ Festival every summer to pay tribute to the area's most famous resident. In the midst of hula hoops and picture-taking and wagon rides is the sense that there's really something eternally intriguing about the Lake Champlain monster.
If I saw Champ on the beach, I'd just hide, and if he went away, I'd come back and swim again.
There are those who believe that something mysterious lives in Lake Champlain.
I feel blessed because I had the courage and the fortitude to come forward and say, okay guys, here it is.
Sandra Mansi recounts her experience for visitors and locals alike, occasionally giving presentations but still not seeking any profit from her photo or legendary story. For some, these creatures are much more than mere local legend. And wherever there are reports of lake monsters, there are people just like this. Locals, visitors, scientists, and investigators yearning to become part of the legend itself. There's one man on the shore of Loch Ness who is emblematic of this universal devotion to solving the lake monster mystery. In 1991, at the age of 29, Steve Feltham dropped out of the rat race, sold his home in the south of England, and moved here to become a full-time monster hunter. He set up home by the shore and supports himself by selling homemade Loch Ness replicas.
And the tourists just turn up by the busload and they buy a few of these off of me. And that keeps me in enough food to keep hunting for these monsters. Certificate, yep. I'll find you some change.
But what would make someone want to give up everything to search for a lake monster?
We've got this mystery at Loch Ness. We've got people seeing things at Loch Ness. Something has to be the explanation. And all I want to do is be part of identifying what that something is.
That something hooked his attention many years ago when he was a young boy on holiday with his family.
And at that point, there was the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau. They were mounting a very big operation all summer long. And me as a 7-year-old boy, I was just amazed there's people looking for monsters.
He couldn't take his eyes off the water, always on the lookout for Nessie.
Very much Loch Ness has been my babysitter in the way that my parents could leave me watching the water and they'd know I'd still be there when they came back.
Steve is one of the many believers who've been lured by the lake and its mysterious monster.
If I can just put one piece of evidence in there that takes us a lot nearer to solving the mystery, I'll be well content with that. That's what I want to do. Even if I don't solve it, to add something to the jigsaw puzzle, I'll be content.
But after decades of baffling people at Loch Ness and Lake Champlain, will the jigsaw puzzle ever be fully assembled? Will scientists in the US and the United Kingdom ever find proof of Nessie or of Champ?
All I can say is to the scientists, just keep looking, come here, spend some time, and you might just be lucky like the rest of us who know that there's a Loch Ness monster in there.
Decide for yourselves. I'm not going to try and twist your arms one way or the other, but I know what I saw. There's no doubt at all, in my opinion, that these creatures exist.
I suppose at the end of the day, Loch Ness can be regarded either as something impenetrable, something veiled, or it's a mirror to our own imagination. It is not yet transparent enough for us to be able to tell which it is.
We just got to keep sticking at it.
Whether it's a dinosaur, a deceptive wave, an undiscovered species, or just another big fish story, the Loch Ness Monster and the Lake Champlain Monster will continue to keep people hunting for a long, long time.